My name is Nora Hale, and I was 36 when my father told a room full of relatives that I was not a real Hale and had no right to speak for my grandmother. He said it at Cedar Bend Senior Living, in front of my grandmother, her case manager, my aunt, and 2 cousins who had come for lemonade and cake they did not pay for. He said, "You don't get to sign for this family, Nora. You were never the one in charge." The part he did not know was that 2 hours earlier, I had already seen the petition he filed to take over my grandmother's decisions. I had the bank alert. I had the notary log. I had the voicemail from the probate clerk asking why my grandmother's signature on a medical affidavit looked copied from a different day. And I had one more thing he had not found yet. Stay with me, because the hearing where my father lost access to my grandmother lasted 22 minutes, and the quietest person in the room was the one who had already signed the right papers. If you have one family member who always says, "We handle things ourselves," put that in the comments. That sentence is usually doing more damage than it sounds like. My name is Nora Hale. I was 36, and I worked as a county records intake clerk in Franklin County, North Carolina. That meant I saw paperwork before most people ever saw the result of it. Deeds, liens, death certificates, guardianship packets, emergency motions. The boring pages that decide who gets to touch money, who gets to make medical calls, and who gets to pretend they were always the responsible one. My father hated that I worked there. Not because it paid badly, it did not. Not because it was hard, it was. He hated it because it made me hard to fool. I had spent my entire adult life hearing that I was too formal, too careful, too slow to trust people. My father, Raymond Hale, used to say I acted like every conversation needed to be notarized. My Aunt Linda said I made simple things into processes. My cousin Trey said I looked at life like a spreadsheet. He was not wrong about the spreadsheet part. When you work records, you learn fast that every family has a story and every story has a paper trail. The loudest person in the room is rarely the one who filed first. The smoothest liar is usually the one who assumed nobody would check the date stamp. My grandmother, Evelyn Hale, raised me after my mother died when I was 10. She was the one who taught me to keep copies, write things down, and never let anyone rush a signature. She had a tiny house off Merle Street for most of my childhood, and if she said she would call at 6:00, she called at 6:00. If she said she would help, she helped. If she said, "Nora read the whole page," you read the whole page. My father called that suspicious. Grandma called it common sense. For the last year, Grandma had lived at Cedar Bend after a mild stroke left her left hand weaker than before. She was still sharp, still funny, still the kind of woman who could look at a bad idea and tell you exactly which cousin had brought it to the table. My father called it decline. That was his favorite word. Decline. He used it about her memory, her balance, her handwriting, her phone habits, her finances, and her ability to understand modern arrangements. That last one was his way of saying he wanted control. The trouble started on a Tuesday in April when Cedar Bend called me because Grandma's bank had placed a temporary review on a withdrawal request. "Mrs. Hale," the banker said, careful and quiet, "your mother signed a new durable power packet last week, and the signature on file does not match the one in our system." "My mother is 82, I said, "and I think you mean my grandmother." There was a pause on the line. "Yes, ma'am, sorry, the document was submitted by your father." That was my first proof beat. Not the biggest one. The first one. I sat up straighter in my office chair and turned my screen away from the customer window. A man at the front desk was asking for a certified copy of a marriage license from 1998. 2 seats over, a woman was arguing with her brother about a deed transfer. Normal Tuesday. I asked the banker what kind of packet. She told me it included a doctor's statement, a notary acknowledgement, and an emergency access form for her credit union accounts. My grandmother's accounts were not huge. She had about $18,400 in savings, a small annuity from my grandfather, and a checking account she kept mainly for hospice copays and her facility charges. But small money still matters when someone else thinks they can spend it. I asked the banker to email me everything she could legally send and to hold any movement until I could verify the filing. Then I did what records people do when something feels wrong. I started pulling. The first page was the guardianship petition. My father had filed it in Franklin County Probate Court 6 days earlier. The petition said Grandma had significant cognitive impairment, that she could not manage her own care, and that I, Nora Hale, had been exerting undue influence over her for personal gain. Personal gain. I laughed once when I read that, because if I had been taking personal gain from Grandma, it would have been an extra sandwich and the second half of her crossword pencil. The petition named my father as proposed guardian of the person and the estate. It also attached a medical affidavit from a doctor named R. Whitcomb. I had never heard of him. The affidavit said Grandma could not understand financial decisions and needed immediate family oversight. The notary was someone named Tina Bell. The signature on the jurat was dated the same day my father had taken Grandma to what he called a family wellness lunch. I opened the notary stamp image first. My stomach sank. The stamp number was off by 1 digit from the notary registry. That told me someone had copied an old stamp or pasted in a scan from a different document. I printed the page because when you work records, you stop trusting your eyes on a screen after a while. Paper is where lies get tired. Then I pulled the doctor. R. Whitcomb was listed as an internal medicine physician at a clinic in Hopewell, 27 miles away. I called the clinic. They had no Dr. Whitcomb on staff. They had never had a Dr. Whitcomb on staff. The receptionist put me on hold, came back 2 minutes later, and told me the clinic administrator wanted to know who had used their letterhead. That was proof beat too. By then, I was standing at the copier with my coffee gone cold and a stack of printed pages in my hand. The man waiting for his marriage certificate had stopped asking questions. He could tell something had changed in my face. At 12:40, my father called. I let it ring once before answering. "Nora," he said, "before you do anything formal, let's not turn this into one of your little county dramas." That was a new one. "What did you file on Grandma?" I asked. He sighed the way men sigh when they believe they are the adult in the room and everyone else is slowing them down. "We are handling things. That's all. We have to protect her." There was his sentence. "We are handling things." He said it like a bedtime prayer. He said it like a warning. "You forged a doctor's affidavit," I said. He did not answer the question. "You always make this more formal than it needs to be, Nora. This is family." I wrote that sentence down when I hung up because I knew I would need it later. This is family. That was the lever he used every time he wanted me to surrender something clean. Grandma used to say some people treat family like a title and others treat it like a job. My father treated it like a license. I drove to Cedar Bend after work. Grandma was in the sunroom with a blanket over her legs and a bottle of ginger ale in front of her. She looked smaller than she had the week before, but her eyes were sharp enough to make me feel caught before I even sat down. "You look like you found something bad," she said. I did. She nodded once, like she already knew that part. "Your father came yesterday with Linda and Trey," she said. "He said I needed to let the family help me because you were too busy with your county files." I sat down across from her. "Did he ask you to sign anything?" "He asked me to put my name on a form he said would make the bank stop being difficult." She glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. I did not sign it. Her voice did not shake. She had spent too many years being underestimated to waste fear on people who had not earned it. I showed her the petition. She read it all the way down. When she got to the part about me exerting undue influence, She made a face so small I almost missed it. "You barely influence my thermostat," she said. That was Grandma at her most dangerous. Calm, dry, accurate. I asked her if she had seen the doctor. "I saw a man in a golf shirt for 7 minutes in the family dining room," she said. "He checked my ankle, told me I was doing well for my age, and asked me if I knew who the president was." "Do you know who he was?" "No, but he knew Raymond." That was the first time she looked tired. Not weak, tired. "Nora," she said, "your father has been acting like this is already settled." There it was again. Already settled. That was the line people use when they want the other person to stop asking questions. I told her I was pulling the record. She said, "Of course you are." Then she reached into the side pocket of her wheelchair bag and handed me an envelope. It was unsealed. Inside was a photocopy of her current will, a copy of her medical power of attorney from 3 years ago, and a handwritten note in blue ink that said, "If Raymond comes with papers, call Nora first." I looked up. "How long have you had this?" "Long enough," she said. That was proof beat 3, and it changed the shape of the whole thing. I had gone in thinking my father was trying to spring a guardianship on a woman who might not understand what he was doing. He was not. He was trying to overwrite a plan Grandma had already made. And if she had already made that plan, then he had been watching, waiting, and building around it. I drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat and a sick little calm in my chest. The calm was not peace. It was the feeling you get when your brain stops wasting time on disbelief and starts mapping exits. The next morning, I called the probate clerk, the notary registry office, Cedar Bend's administrator, and the bank fraud desk. The probate clerk told me the petition had been filed under emergency authority. The bank told me my father had attempted to add himself as secondary account contact and had requested a transfer of bill pay authority. The administrator at Cedar Bend asked me to hold while she checked the visitor log. And the notary registry office confirmed that Tina Bell had not renewed her commission until 2 weeks after the date on the jurat. That meant the acknowledgement was impossible. Not suspicious. Impossible. I sat with that word for a minute. Impossible is nice when it belongs to math. It is ugly when it belongs to family. At lunch, I got a text from my Aunt Linda. "We need to talk before you blow this up." I did not reply. 5 minutes later. "Nora, your father is trying to protect Grandma." That sentence was almost funny. I put my phone down and went back to work. At 4:10, Cedar Bend called again. The administrator had found that my father, my aunt, and my cousin Trey had met with the facility social worker 3 days earlier and asked to be listed as primary family contacts for all care decisions. They had also asked whether Nora Hale could be removed from the approved pickup list because she was emotionally reactive. That was the midpoint turn. Not because it was the biggest lie. Because it proved the lie had already escaped the house. They were not just trying to take control of Grandma's money. They were trying to isolate her from me, rewrite her care contacts, and create a file that made my questions look unstable before anyone looked too closely. That meant the guardianship petition was only one piece. The bigger plan was to make me look like the problem, while they moved everything else into place. I drove to Cedar Bend again that evening and found Grandma sitting with her hands folded in her lap, looking out the window at the parking lot. "Your father was here," she said before I even sat down. "I know. He said you had become difficult because you work around paper all day and think it makes you important." I stared at the carpet for a second. He really likes that word. Difficult. No, important. She laughed once. That laugh came out thin, but it was real. "He said this is family and families handle things inside the family," she said. There it was again. This is family. He said that 3 times, I asked. Probably more. Linda says it too when she wants money. We sat with that for a moment. Then Grandma leaned toward me and lowered her voice. He asked me where my account binder was. I looked up fast. What binder? The one you made me keep after your grandfather died. Blue tab, records, account numbers, policy names. You told me to keep it in the linen closet. I felt the blood drain out of my face. The binder contained her pension records, her funeral policy, the annuity statement, her bank logins in sealed envelopes, and copies of every major document she might need if someone tried to get cute. It was at my apartment, locked in a fire box. That meant my father had been looking through her room. Or through mine. Did he find it? I asked. She shook her head. No, but he asked like he expected me to panic. I didn't tell her I had already moved the binder. I didn't tell her I had made 3 copies. I didn't tell her I had begun scanning every page into encrypted folders at midnight. I just nodded and said, good. Then she said the thing that made me understand how much deeper it went. He also asked if I had changed my will. I looked at her. She looked right back. I told him yes, she said. If he asked again, I would change it harder. I laughed despite myself. She smiled at that, then turned serious. Nora, I know you think your father is being greedy. I do. He's more than greedy. She paused. He is scared. That was not the answer I wanted. It was the right one. Men like Raymond do not build long cons because they are calm. They build them because they are desperate enough to lie past the point where their own shame can catch up. At 8:15 that night, I got the email from Cedar Bend with the visitor log attached. My father had signed in under Ray Hale. My aunt had signed in under Linda Carter. Trey had signed in under family support. Each of them had marked the purpose of visit as care coordination. The log also noted that the social worker had told them any change in contacts would require a signed request from Grandma or a court order. That was proof beat 4. And that was the moment I stopped thinking of this as a family dispute. This had crossed into official record territory. Records are where people get honest, whether they mean to or not. The next day, I took a long lunch and drove to the courthouse. I requested certified copies of the emergency guardianship filing, the notary commission history, and the hearing schedule. The clerk behind the counter recognized my badge and gave me the look courthouse people give each other when they know somebody has been dragged into a mess by relatives. You the daughter? She asked. Granddaughter. She nodded once. Figured. The hearing was set for Friday at 9:30 a.m. in Courtroom 4B. My father had filed for temporary emergency authority and was asking the court to approve immediate access to Grandma's finances and medical decisions pending a full hearing. He had also included a statement from Linda saying she supported the arrangement. Of course he had. He was the kind of man who always wanted one more signature than he deserved. I called Grandma first. She was quiet when I told her the date. Then she said, Good, I have the hat. The hat? You know, the blue one. The one your grandfather said made me look like I meant business. I closed my eyes for a second. Wear it. I plan to. Then I called the bank. They had already frozen the attempted bill pay change and flagged the account for elder financial abuse review. They wanted me to come in with Grandma and complete an updated trusted contact form. I asked if they had seen the forged affidavit yet. The banker said no, but their fraud team would want it. I sent it. Then I called Cedar Bend and asked the administrator to make sure Grandma had transportation to court. She said she already had a van scheduled and that the social worker would attend. That was when I realized the whole thing was no longer happening in my father's private language. It was happening in paper, in logs, in signatures, in bank flags, and in a courtroom. That is a bad place to lie. Friday came gray and cool. My father arrived in a navy suit he wears when he wants to look like a man who owns 3 things and understands none of them. Linda wore too much perfume. Trey wore the expression of a man who had agreed to be present without agreeing to be responsible. They all sat on the left side of the room like they had rehearsed their wait. I sat with Grandma on the right. She wore the blue hat. She had on pearl studs, lipstick, and the exact face she used to wear when she was about to tell a salesman no. The courtroom had the judge, the clerk, the court reporter, the social worker, the bank fraud officer, and 2 facility staff members from Cedar Bend. 7 witnesses, not counting the relatives. That was enough. My father looked at me once and did the smile he uses when he thinks I am about to behave. Then he looked at Grandma and said, "Ma, we just need to make this simple." Grandma did not answer. The judge called the case. My father stood first, because of course he did. He introduced himself as the oldest son and primary family support. The judge asked if he was seeking guardianship. He said yes, but only temporary, and only because Grandma was confused and being influenced. The judge asked who he believed was influencing her. My father turned and looked at me. "My daughter," he said. "Nora, she has decided she knows what's best. She makes things formal. She keeps people from helping." The judge nodded once and asked for the petitioner packet. The clerk handed it up. The judge looked at the affidavit first. Then the notary acknowledgement. Then the medical statement. She looked up at my father and said, "Mr. Hale, can you tell me where Dr. Whitcomb practices?" My father blinked. "Hopewell, I think." The judge turned to the bank officer. "Has the bank verified this physician?" "No, Your Honor. We could not find a doctor by that name at any clinic in the county." The room went very still. The social worker raised a hand only after the judge nodded. We also received a care contact request from Mr. Hale's side, asking to remove Nora Hale as approved contact. My aunt sat up straighter. That was just so things could be organized. The judge looked at her. "Ma'am, were you present at the medical visit?" "No." "Did you witness the signing?" "No." "Did you personally speak to your mother about this filing?" Linda hesitated. "Yes," she said. "She was fine with family taking over." Grandma gave a small sound in her throat that meant she was trying not to laugh. The judge asked for Grandma's counsel, but she had none. Then she asked whether Grandma wanted to speak. My father jumped in. "Your Honor, with respect, she's confused. She gets tired." Grandma turned her head and looked at him. Not angry. Just disappointed enough to be dangerous. "Raymond," she said, "you asked me for the binder." He froze. She kept going. "You asked me 3 times where I kept my records. Then you brought Linda and Trey back the next day and told me Nora was too busy with paperwork to help me and that families have to trust each other." The judge raised a hand. "Mrs. Hale, take your time." Grandma nodded once. "He also brought a man in a golf shirt who told me I was doing well for my age." The bank officer looked down at her notes. "That is not a treating physician." "No," Grandma said, "I noticed." The court reporter kept typing. My father's jaw tightened. He was not good at being seen in the exact moment he had built for someone else. Then the judge asked the bank officer to explain the flagged account activity. The officer described the attempted access change, the request for emergency withdrawal authority, and the mismatch between the signed packet and the bank's elder protection standards. Then she held up a copy of the packet. "We also received an email from Nora Hale within 2 hours of the alert asking us to preserve all records. My father shot me a look. Not anger first. Recognition. He understood then that I had not been stumbling around hoping he would confess. I had already lined the floor with his own paperwork. The judge looked to the clerk. Was the petition accepted as filed? Yes, Your Honor, but it was marked for review once the clerk found the physician's signature issue. That was the opening I had been waiting for. The judge turned to me. Ms. Hale, you may speak if you have standing through the records office, but keep it concise. I stood. My father shifted in his chair, like he was annoyed that the county had given me permission to breathe. Yes, Your Honor. I set my folder on the lectern. I work records intake for the county. On Tuesday, I was notified of a bank review on my grandmother's account. I pulled the guardianship petition. The medical affidavit references a physician who does not exist at the listed clinic. The notary commission number does not match the registry. The bank has a fraud hold on the attempted access change. Cedar Bend can confirm that the petitioner asked to remove me as approved contact before any court order existed. I looked at the judge, then at Grandma. My grandmother is competent. She knows her accounts. She knows her medications. She knew enough to give me a binder 3 years ago in case this day ever came. I handed the judge the copies. Then I added the one thing my father had not counted on. And last week, she updated her paperwork. My father sat forward. What paperwork? I did not answer him. The judge asked Grandma if she had signed anything new. Grandma reached into her purse and took out an envelope so crisp it looked ironed. Inside were a revised medical power of attorney, an updated trusted contact form for the bank, and a notarized statement naming me as her primary decision support and the bank as the only outside institution authorized to call about her finances. Her signature was clear. The notary was valid. The date was 2 days before the petition. The room went quiet in the way only a courtroom can go quiet. My father stared at the page like it might rearrange itself. You signed that without us, he said. Grandma looked at him. Raymond, I signed it because of you. That was the line that landed hardest. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was true. She turned to the judge. I know what I am doing. I know who I trust. I did not ask for this hearing. My son did. Then she added, very calmly, and I do not want him handling my money. That was the point where my father finally lost the room. Not by yelling. By moving too fast. He stood and said the thing he had probably said in his head 100 times. This is family, Your Honor. We handle things ourselves. The judge did not blink. Mr. Hale, no one here is disputing family. We are disputing process, authenticity, and authority. I had to look down for a second because I could feel my mouth almost smile. Process, authenticity, authority. That is all my father had ever underestimated. The bank officer then produced the account review timeline. It showed the attempted access change, the flagged transfer, and the hold she placed after my email. The Cedar Bend administrator produced the visitor log. The social worker produced the care contact request. And then the clerk read the notary commission mismatch aloud, line by line, while my aunt got smaller and smaller in her chair. My father kept trying to speak over the stack. She doesn't understand these things. She was confused when she signed. Nora pushed this. This is family. The judge finally looked directly at him. Mr. Hale, your mother has spoken more clearly in this courtroom than you have. That got a small sound from somewhere behind me. Maybe one of the court staff. Maybe the facility social worker. I didn't turn around to check. The judge asked whether any other family member had attempted to isolate Grandma from approved contacts or facility staff. The Cedar Bend administrator raised her hand and said yes, several times, including a request to redirect all information through Raymond Hale and Linda Carter. Then she added, "We were told Nora Hale was unreliable because she does things by the book." That was almost funny. By the book. My father had spent years mocking me for that, and now it was the phrase that separated him from the woman with the authority to say no. The judge took a breath and announced her ruling. Emergency guardianship denied. The petition was not accepted as valid. The notary issue was referred for review. The bank's elder protection hold would stay in place until Grandma's updated contacts were verified. The family was ordered to cease any attempt to represent themselves as decision-makers until a full competency evaluation could be completed by an approved physician. And because my father had filed under emergency authority with a defective affidavit, the court was referring the packet to the County Fraud Review Unit. That part made my aunt actually gasp. My father looked like he had been slapped with a wet towel. The judge was not finished. "Mrs. Hale," she said to Grandma, "do you want the court to note that your granddaughter, Nora Hale, is your designated contact and that no one else is authorized to make decisions on your behalf absent further order?" Grandma did not hesitate. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge asked if she wanted Raymond or Linda removed from any direct financial contact list pending review. "Yes." Then the judge asked if she wanted the petitioning documents preserved for review. "Yes," Grandma said, and this time she smiled a little. "I am very interested in what my son thought he could get away with." That got a ripple through the room. Not laughter exactly. Relief. The judge signed the temporary order. The clerk stamped it. The bank officer marked her file. The social worker updated the facility contact list in real time. And my father sat there with his hands locked together, so hard his knuckles went white. He tried one last move as we stood up to leave. He looked at Grandma and said, low enough that he thought only she would hear, "You are letting her turn you against your own son." Grandma stopped. She put one hand on the back of my chair. "No," she said, "I am letting my grandson-in-law's lies turn me against the one who told them." I could have breathed fire on that line. Instead, I just took Grandma's arm and walked her out. The hallway outside the courtroom was crowded with people waiting on traffic matters, small claims, name changes, and one child custody hearing. None of them knew exactly what had happened in 4B, but they knew enough to read the faces. My father came out 5 minutes later, looking like a man, trying not to kick a wall in public. Linda would not meet my eye. Trey had already gone pale. The clerk caught up to me at the elevator and handed me a certified copy of the order before I even asked. That was the practical receipt. Stamped. Filed. Official. My grandmother slid the paper into her purse like it weighed nothing and everything at the same time. Then, because there was one more thing the day needed, she asked if we could stop for pie. We did. At a diner 3 blocks from the courthouse, with the order folded inside her purse and the bank on speakerphone verifying her new contact list, Grandma took off her blue hat and set it in her lap. "I told your grandfather once," she said, "that if I ever got too tired to read the paper, he should start worrying." I smiled. "You can still read the paper." "Yes," she said, "which is why I was worried about Raymond." That made me laugh for real. The emotional receipt came later that afternoon. We were back in her room at Cedar Bend, and she asked me to open the window because she liked the way the air moved in April. I did. She reached for my hand and squeezed it once. "You stayed," she said. That was all. No speech. No apology tour. Just 2 words and a hand squeeze from the woman who had been teaching me how to hold a line since I was 10. You stayed. My father was not done after that. People like him never are when the paperwork goes against them. He called twice that weekend and left messages saying the family should calm down and discuss things like adults. Then he texted Linda and Trey in a group thread that I had weaponized Grandma's decline for control. That would have been funnier if the court file had not already locked him out of the accounts. The bank froze the attempted access changes for 45 days while their fraud unit reviewed the packet. Cedar Bend removed Raymond and Linda from the care contact list and required all visitation requests to go through the social worker. The county opened a review on the forged affidavit. The doctor whose name was used sent a brief statement saying he had never examined Evelyn Hale and would be filing his own complaint. And the notary, Tina Bell, turned out to have used her commission number on 3 other packets that all now looked suspicious enough to deserve a closer look. That was the bigger truth, the one I saw only after the first week settled. My father had not done this alone. He had been collecting shortcuts around Grandma for months. Not one mistake. A system. The reason I know that is because records do not lie in one dramatic sentence. They lie in patterns. The visitor log. The altered account contact. The copied commission number. The doctor's non-existent clinic record. The care contact request. The hallway sign-in sheets. The unanswered bank call. All of it fit. My aunt tried to call me 3 times after the hearing. I let it go to voicemail. On the 4th try, I answered because I was tired of my phone vibrating across the kitchen table while I ate cereal for dinner. "Nora," she started, "you made a big scene." "No," I said, "the court made a ruling. You know Raymond is stressed. He filed a false guardianship petition. You always make things formal." I actually laughed at that one. "Linda, that is the one thing saving Grandma right now." She hung up on me. That was fine. The next Tuesday, Grandma and I sat with the bank and signed the updated trusted contact forms. She added me, the social worker, and Cedar Bend's administrator. My father was not there. Neither was Linda. Neither was Trey. The banker stamped the packet and slid me a copy. The clerk at the front desk said, "We see this more often than people think." That was a bad sentence to hear. It also explained why she sounded calm. After that, I spent 2 weeks helping Grandma review every account, every policy, and every emergency contact in a way my father could not touch. I changed passwords. I locked down the mail. I updated the funeral policy with the proper beneficiary page. I put the binder back in her linen closet, but this time I added a bright red tab that said "Do not sign anything without Nora." Grandma saw it and rolled her eyes. "You and your labels." "It works." "Yes," she said, annoyingly. That was the best compliment she could give. 2 months later, the county finished its review and referred the notary issue to the state board. The emergency guardianship packet never became a guardianship. My father's access stayed restricted. The bank never released the hold without Grandma's direct authorization. And Cedar Bend put in a standing note that any change to her room, contacts, or billing had to go through her personally or through me with her present. That mattered. Not because it was dramatic. Because it meant she stopped being a file other people could move around. About a week after the hearing, my father tried one more time to make this feel like a misunderstanding instead of what it was. He caught me in the parking lot outside the county office while I was carrying 3 file boxes to my car. I saw him coming and almost laughed because men like Raymond always think a parking lot gives them some advantage. No judge, no clerk, no court reporter, just air and whatever version of themselves they can produce when nobody is timing them. "Nora," he said, soft like he was approaching a scared animal, "we need to talk like adults." I set the boxes down on the pavement. "You can talk." He looked around first, checking for witnesses, which told me everything I needed to know. This got out of hand, he said. Linda panicked, Trey overreacted, and I was trying to protect Mom before the bank made a scene. The bank did not make a scene, I said. The bank found forged paperwork. His mouth tightened. You always jump straight to accusations. You always jump straight to control. That shut him up for a second. He tried again, lower this time. I am still your father. That line used to work on me when I was younger. It used to turn every argument into a guilt tax. But I had heard him use it in the courtroom, and by then it sounded like a demand for obedience, not a claim to love. And Grandma is still your mother, I said. That did not stop you. He flinched. Not much. Just enough. You made me look like a criminal. No, I said. Your own paperwork did that. He asked me if I really planned to leave him out of everything. I told him the truth. You left yourself out when you decided to file a fake petition instead of asking her what she wanted. He stared at me like I had insulted his religion. We were going to handle this in the family. That sentence is the whole problem. I picked the boxes back up. He called after me. She's old, Nora. Things move fast when people get old. I turned around once. Not fast enough for you, I said. That was the last real conversation we had for a while. After that, the only things he sent were texts that sounded like they had been drafted by somebody who thought shame was the same thing as accountability. I got one that said, "We can work this out." Then another that said, "Your grandmother does not need a public fight." Then, after the county review widened, a final one that said, "I hope you are satisfied." I was not satisfied. I was calm. There is a difference. Satisfied means the damage felt balanced. Calm means the damage had been named. Grandma understood the difference right away. At the next Saturday visit, she had her crossword on the tray table, a cup of tea, and the courthouse order folded inside a yellow envelope with a label on the front that said important. She had written that herself in block letters so large it looked like a warning sign. You know what I love about this? She asked, tapping the envelope. It has no feelings. Most legal things don't. Exactly. Then she handed me a second envelope. Inside was a hand-signed list of people she wanted at the table if the matter ever came up again. Me, the bank officer, the Cedar Bend administrator, and her old neighbor Mabel, who could spot a liar by how he sat in a chair. No Raymond. No Linda. No Trey. I am not being unkind, she said. I know. I am being specific. That line deserved to be framed. She had learned, over a long life, that vague people get managed by loud people. Specific people get protected by documents. So we kept making the paperwork specific. Updated contacts. Updated beneficiaries. Updated permission forms. Updated emergency instructions. Updated everything. I even had the bank add a verbal passphrase so no one could call in and pretend to be her. Because after the petition, I no longer trusted anyone who thought a signature was just decoration. And slowly, the house around Grandma got quiet again. Not peaceful in a magical way. Just stable. The way a room feels when the wrong person stops rearranging it. People ask me sometimes whether I felt relieved when the hearing ended. I did. But the bigger feeling was quieter. It was the relief of finally seeing the shape of the lie. My father had spent years saying I made things too formal. What he meant was that I made them observable. He wanted family to mean blurred edges, soft promises, and invisible favors. I wanted family to mean names on paper, real authority, and consent you could prove. Those are not the same thing. He taught me that the hard way. Now, when I go see Grandma on Saturdays, I still carry my county badge in one pocket and the spare copy of her papers in the other. She likes to tease me about it. There's my little records woman, she says. I tell her I'm just keeping the copies where they belong. Then she asks if I want pie. And I always say yes. My father still says this is family whenever he wants someone to stop asking about the money or the filing or the lies. He can keep saying it. The court already answered. Family is not who gets to talk the loudest. It is who keeps the records when someone else tries to disappear them. That is my story. My father said I was not a real Hale. The judge said the petition was invalid. And Grandma, with her blue hat and her sharp little smile, signed the papers that mattered before he could touch them. If this hit home, leave a comment with the word paper trail. I read them. And if somebody in your life keeps telling you one little signature is no big deal, check it twice.